The marshal's wagon was coming at dawn, and Silas Crowheart had 7 hours to find himself a wife. He stood in the snow outside the Red Lantern Saloon with the wind tearing at his buckskin coat and the marriage paper folded inside his shirt, warm against his chest from the fever of his own skin. His beard was crusted white. His hands were stiff inside his gloves. Somewhere 15 miles above town, 2 children slept in his cabin beneath every blanket he owned, trusting him because he had told them he would fix things. He had said it like a man who knew how. Now he stood beneath the swinging lantern of a saloon door, listening to the laughter and whiskey voices inside, and for the first time in 20 years of mountain living, Silas Crowheart was afraid to step into a room full of people. Not afraid of fists, not afraid of rifles, not afraid of the kind of men who got brave after their 3rd drink and wanted to test whether the stories about him were true. He had faced worse things than men. He had heard wolves circle a camp in the dark. He had crawled 3 miles with a torn leg after a bear trap snapped wrong. He had slept through blizzards that buried the trees to their lower branches, but he had never begged. And if he failed, Eli and Lily Mercer would be taken from him before the sun cleared the Wind River peaks. The thought put iron in his bones. Silas shoved the door open so hard it struck the wall and made every lamp flame jump. Cold rushed in behind him. Cards stopped moving. Voices died halfway through words. A fiddle string squealed once and went silent. Men turned from the bar, from the tables, from the stove. A few women seated near the back looked up from their cups and sewing. Every eye found him. Silas Crowheart filled the doorway like something the storm had carved out of pine leather and old grief. He stepped inside and shut the door. Snow melted off him in slow drops. His boots left dark prints on the plank floor. The saloon smelled of tobacco, spilled whiskey-wet wool and stove heat. Tavish Pike stood behind the bar with a rag in one hand and a bottle in the other. He was a broad man with a scar through one eyebrow and the careful face of somebody who had survived by noticing trouble before it spoke. Silas, Tavish said, "Didn't figure on seeing you till thaw." Silas took off his gloves. His fingers would not stop shaking. Tavish saw it. So did half the room, Whiskey Silas said. Tavish poured without another word. The glass looked small in Silas's hand. He swallowed the whiskey, set the glass down, and turned to face the room. "I need a wife." For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then the laughter came. It started near the faro table, one sharp bark from a freighter with a red nose. Then it spread to the lumber hands, then to the card players, then to men standing shoulder to shoulder at the bar. Somebody slapped the table so hard a coin rolled off and struck the floor. A wife. A man wheezed. Crowheart wants a wife. Maybe he's tired of kissing his traps goodnight. Maybe the wolves turned him down. The laughter rose ugly and relieved. It was easier to laugh than to ask why a man like Silas Crowheart would ride through a killing cold after midnight and ask such a thing with dead eyes. Silas did not speak. He let them laugh. Then Tavish stopped smiling. The saloon keeper leaned forward, looking hard at Silas's face. One by one, others saw it too. The frozen beard, the hollow cheeks, the gray eyes burning with something too raw to be pride. And beneath the thawing ice on his weathered face, a tear had cut a clean track down through trail dirt. The laughter broke apart and fell away. Silas gripped the edge of the bar. "I need a wife before sunrise." No one answered. He reached into his shirt and pulled out a folded paper, then laid it on the bar. "License is legal. Paid for in Fort Washakie 3 days ago. Needs a preacher, a signature, and a woman willing to stand beside me when Marshal Bellard comes at dawn." Tavish's voice lowered. "What in God's name did you get into?" Silas stared at the paper because looking at faces was harder. 3 weeks ago I found a wagon in Crow Creek Pass. Axle broke. Horse gone. Man and woman inside were dead from fever. 2 days, maybe 3. Someone near the stove whispered a prayer. The children were alive. Silas's voice roughened. Boy named Eli, 8 years old. Girl named Lily, 5. Boy had kept snow packed around a milk can trying to save what was left. Girl couldn't stand. Carried them home. The room had become so quiet that the stove's iron belly popping sounded like gunfire. I fed them, got the fever down. Figured when the pass cleared I'd bring them here and find someone decent to take them. But Marshal Bellard rode up last week, said a lone trapper with no wife has no lawful claim, said children need a proper household, said if I didn't have one by dawn, he'd take them to Cheyenne. Nobody laughed now. Everybody knew the stories about that orphan house. Children sent there came back older than their years if they came back at all. Some were hired out to factories or farms, some vanished east in wagons with strangers. Frontier children without kin were easy to lose. Silas swallowed. His throat moved like it hurt. I promised them, he said. I told Eli no one would take his sister. I told Lily she could sleep safe. I gave my word. His voice broke on the last word, and that did what his reputation never had. It frightened the room. A mountain man could survive hunger-cold wolves and men with guns. But no one knew what to do with a mountain man whose heart had cracked open in public. A woman rose from the back near the stove. Her chair scraped softly, heads turned. Mara Whitcomb stood with her hands folded before her gray dress. She was not young, not old, not beautiful in the way men praised across barrooms. She was thin from years of making meals smaller than hunger. Her dark hair was pinned back in a plain knot. Grief had settled around her mouth and eyes so long ago it looked almost like character. Silas knew her by sight. The widow seamstress lived above the wash house, took in mending, spoke little, smiled less. She walked toward him through the crowded saloon and the men moved aside without being asked. "You said their names are Eli and Lily," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "How long have they been with you? 3 weeks. Are they sick?" "Not now. Lily coughs some at night, but she eats. Eli watches her like a hawk." "Do they know you came here?" Silas looked down. "I told them I was coming to fix things." Mara's face did not change, but her eyes sharpened. "That is not an answer." "No," he said quietly. "They don't know." She studied him. He felt smaller beneath her gaze than he had ever felt beneath a rifle barrel. "I do not need a husband tonight," Mara said. "I need to know whether those children will wake tomorrow under a kind roof." The words landed soft, but they struck the room harder than any shout. Silas opened his mouth and found nothing ready. Kind was not a word men had used for him. Hard, yes. Dangerous, useful, mean when needed, silent, strange, half wild. Kind was a thing women did in warm houses with clean curtains and bread cooling on tables. He thought of Lily crying in the night for a mother whose body lay frozen in Crow Creek Pass. He thought of Eli standing between her and the door with a kitchen knife too big for his fist when Silas first brought them in. He thought of his own hands, scarred and blunt, trying to braid Lily's hair and failing so badly she had cried harder. "I don't know how," he said. A murmur moved through the saloon. Silas lifted his eyes to Mara. "I don't know how to be a father. Don't know how to talk soft when a child's scared. Don't know how to make a house feel like anything but shelter. But I know how to keep my word. I know how to work. I know how to stand between them and harm. And if you show me what kindness looks like, I swear before every soul in this room I'll learn it." Mara held his gaze, and to me she asked. Heat rose under his wind-burned face. "To you too. I swear it." She took one slow breath. The saloon seemed to breathe with her. "I have conditions. Name them. I will be your wife, not your property." "Yes, ma'am." "You will not touch me unless I say you may. Not because of law, not because of vows, not because some preacher says I belong to you." Silas nodded once hard. "Yes, ma'am. And those children come first, before your pride, before your temper, before mine. If they are hurt, neglected, frightened, or treated like burdens, I will walk out of your cabin even if the snow takes me." "They come first," Silas said. "Always." Mara put out her hand. Silas looked at it as if she had offered him fire in the middle of a frozen field. Then he took it carefully. His hand swallowed hers, but his grip was gentle enough not to bend a flower stem. Tavish Pike cleared his throat. His voice was rough. "I'll fetch Reverend Bell." "No need," said a cracked voice from near the card table. An old man in a black coat rose from a chair nobody had noticed him occupying. Reverend Amos Bell had a face like dried apple peel and eyes still bright with judgment. "I came in for coffee and warmth. Seems the Lord had poorer sleep in mind for me." A nervous laugh passed through the room and died quickly. Mara went to pack. It did not take long. In the narrow room above the wash house, she placed a sewing kit. One spare dress, a small Bible, and a carved wooden rattle into a canvas bag. The rattle made no sound anymore. Her daughter had chewed one side smooth before cholera took her breath at 6 months old. Mara held it once, then packed it at the bottom. She looked around the room she had rented for 6 years. The bed, the washstand, the cracked mirror, the single window facing the alley. Nothing in her rose to say goodbye. When she returned to the saloon, Silas stood beside the preacher with his coat brushed clean, as much as weather allowed. He looked terrified. That almost comforted her. The vows were spoken beneath low rafters while dawn waited beyond the mountains. Silas's voice was quiet. Mara's was steady. When Reverend Bell told him he might kiss the bride, Silas looked so stricken that Mara shook her head. "We are leaving that part out." Mercy Tavish muttered, "Finally some sense tonight." The certificate was signed. Wax was pressed. Names dried in ink. Silas Crowheart, Mara Whitcomb Crowheart. Outside the cold struck like a hand. The eastern sky had begun to pale. Silas helped Mara onto his horse, then swung up before her. She placed her arms around his waist because falling would be foolish, not because he was her husband. They rode out of Cold Spring Crossing while the saloon lamps faded behind them. The trail climbed into black pine and blue snow. No one spoke. The wind moved through the trees with a sound like old spirits whispering warnings. Mara pressed her cheek against the back of Silas's frozen coat and tried not to think about the children waiting in that cabin, or the dead ones she had buried, or the fact that she had just married a stranger before sunrise. After miles of silence, Silas spoke without turning. "Cabin's rough, I assumed. Lily cries at night. So do grown women sometimes." He said nothing for a while. "Eli won't trust you. He shouldn't, not yet." The horse pushed on through the drifts. At last, smoke appeared between the trees, rising thin and gray from a stone chimney. Mara saw the cabin then tucked in a clearing beneath heavy pines, its roof burdened with snow, its windows dim with firelight. As they rode closer, a small face appeared behind the glass. A boy's face. It vanished at once. Silas stopped the horse, but for a moment neither of them moved. Mara felt his breath catch beneath her hands. The man who had faced the saloon, the laughter, the shame, and the preacher now sat frozen before his own door. Mara climbed down before he could help her. The snow came nearly to her ankles. Her canvas bag hung from one hand. Her wedding certificate rested inside Silas's coat. Her old life lay somewhere behind her in a rented room that had never been home. From inside the cabin came a child's frightened voice. Mara looked at the door, then at the mountain man beside her. "Go on," she said softly. "They have waited long enough." Silas opened the cabin door like a man afraid of what waited on the other side. Warmth rolled out first, carrying the smell of wood smoke, damp wool, old ashes, and something sour beneath it all. Mara stood behind him in the snow. Her canvas bag clutched in one hand, watching his shoulders fill the doorway. For all his size, he seemed uncertain there, as if the cabin belonged less to him than to the two frightened souls inside it. "Silas," the boy called again. "I'm here, Eli." Silas's voice softened in a way Mara had not heard in the saloon. "I came back. You said before I woke up. I know, I'm sorry." A pause. Then the boy's voice sharpened. "Who's outside?" Silas glanced back at Mara. The dawn had turned the snow blue around her boots. Her fingers ached with cold, but she did not move closer. This was not a threshold she had the right to cross too quickly. "I brought someone," Silas said. "Someone who's going to help. I don't want help, I know." The answer surprised Mara. Silas did not argue. He did not command. He only stood there taking the boy's anger like weather. Then a smaller voice asked, "Is it the marshal?" "No, Lily," Silas said. "It ain't the marshal." Mara heard a scrape inside, then the quick pad of bare feet. She stepped onto the porch. Silas moved aside. The cabin was dim lit by a low fire that needed feeding. Rough beams crossed the ceiling, darkened by years of smoke. Pelts hung from pegs along one wall. Traps sat stacked in a corner beside a rifle and a coil of rope. A table made from uneven planks stood near the stove, its surface crowded with a tin cup, a dull knife, a sack of cornmeal, and 2 plates not yet washed. It was shelter, strong shelter, but it was not yet a home. The children stood near the far wall. Eli Mercer was smaller than Mara expected, though his eyes made him seem older. His hair stuck up in dark tufts and his shirt hung loose on his narrow shoulders. One hand gripped a kitchen knife with the blade pointed down, not raised but ready. Behind him, half hidden in a blanket, stood Lily. Her fair hair was tangled. Her face was pale, except for 2 feverish spots of pink on her cheeks. Eli looked at Mara as if she had come to steal the floor beneath him. "Who is she?" Silas took off his hat. "This is Mara." "That don't answer." Silas swallowed. "She's my wife now." Lily blinked. Eli stared. "You got married?" the boy said. "Yes. Last night? Yes, you can't just go into town and find a wife." Eli's voice climbed. "That ain't how people work." Silas did not answer fast enough. I had to, he said at last. Marshal Bellard comes this morning. He told me if I didn't have a proper household, he'd take you and Lily. Eli's grip tightened on the knife. So you brought her here to fool him? No. Yes, you did. Mara stepped inside and shut the door against the cold. Eli's eyes snapped to her, wary and bright. She set her bag down slowly. You're right, she said. Eli blinked once, thrown off by agreement. Mara stayed near the door. He did bring me because of the marshal, and I'm a stranger. I'm not your mother. I'm not going to pretend I am. Lily's blanket slipped lower, her blue eyes fixed on Mara's face. Eli's mouth trembled, but his voice stayed hard. Then, why are you here? Mara looked at the boy, then at the little girl behind him. The cabin seemed to fall away for a moment. She saw another room, another bed, another small face gone still with fever. She felt again the helpless rage of clean cloths, boiled water prayers, and nothing changing. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. I am not here to replace what you lost. I am here because no child should have to carry grief alone. Eli did not lower the knife, but something in his face cracked just a hairline split through anger. Lily whispered, Are you nice? Mara looked at her. I try to be. Do you know how to make pancakes? A sound almost escaped Silas, something between a cough and a wounded laugh. Mara glanced at him, then back at Lily. Yes, Silas makes them bad. They ain't that bad, Silas said. Eli, still watching Mara, muttered, They taste like burnt bark. For the first time since leaving town, Mara felt the faintest warmth inside her chest. Not joy, not yet, but the memory of it. Then I suppose breakfast is the first matter to settle. Before anyone could answer, hooves sounded outside. Silas went still. Eli's face drained of color. Lily made a small noise and grabbed the back of his shirt. Silas crossed to the window and looked out. His jaw hardened. Marshal. Mara removed her gloves and smoothed the front of her gray dress. Her hands were chapped red and shaking slightly. She folded them together so the children would not see. A fist struck the door. Crowheart Silas opened it. Marshal Bellard stood on the porch with snow on his hat and impatience in his eyes. Behind him through the trees waited a wagon with 2 horses and a canvas cover. The sight of it made Eli take one step backward. Bellard looked past Silas into the room. His gaze found Mara and narrowed. This her, Silas's voice was steady. Yes, name Mara Crowheart, Mara said before Silas could answer. Bellard looked her over as if searching for rope marks. You hear willing I am. Married legal. Silas handed over the certificate. Bellard unfolded it, studied the signatures, the preacher's mark, the pressed wax. He seemed disappointed to find it proper. Married in the middle of the night, he said. Yes, Mara replied. That don't strike you as peculiar. Many things in this territory are peculiar, Marshal. The question is whether they are legal. Silas glanced at her, startled. Bellard folded the certificate and handed it back. I'll be checking. You may. If I hear these young ones are mistreated, I'll come back. They will not be mistreated, Silas said. Bellard looked at Eli. Boy, you being cared for. Eli's eyes flicked to Silas, then to Mara, then to the wagon outside. He understood more than a child should. Yes, sir, he said, though the words scraped out hard. The marshal shifted his gaze to Lily. You. Lily pressed closer behind Eli. Mara lowered one hand, not touching her, only letting it rest where Lily could see it. The little girl whispered, I had pancakes. Bellard frowned. That's so? Not yet, Lily added, but she knows how. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Bellard grunted, turned, and stepped off the porch. I'll be back through after thaw. They watched him climb into the wagon and drive away between the pines. The wheels groaned through packed snow. No one in the cabin moved until the sound faded into the timber. Then Lily asked, Does that mean I don't have to go? Silas crouched slowly as if lowering himself before a skittish animal. You don't have to go. And Eli. He stays too. Lily looked at Mara. And you? Mara felt the question pass through the cabin and settle somewhere deeper than law. I'm staying, she said. Lily did not smile. She only nodded as if accepting a fact too large to trust all at once. The first breakfast was made from poor cornmeal, 2 eggs and lard that smelled old but not spoiled. Mara found the pan blackened, the knives dull, and the flour sack nearly empty. The stove smoked until Silas adjusted the damper with a shamefaced look. You've been living like a bear, she said. Silas looked down. Bears keep cleaner dens. That startled a laugh from Lily. A small one. It vanished quickly, but Mara heard it. They ate at the table. Lily took one bite of pancake and looked amazed. Eli waited until everyone else had tried theirs before eating. Then he finished too and said nothing. Silas watched Mara as if breakfast were a miracle. It made her uncomfortable. "It is cornmeal in a pan," she said. "Do not look at me like I parted the Red Sea." "I don't know what that means," Lily said. "It means Silas is being dramatic." "I ain't," Silas said. Eli looked at him. "You are." The cabin breathed again. After breakfast, Silas went outside to tend the horse and split more wood. Mara rolled up her sleeves and looked around. The work waiting for her was everywhere. Dishes crusted in a bucket, clothes piled without order, a child's blanket stiff with old damp, windows so filmed with soot that daylight entered like a rumor. She began with water. Eli watched from the corner. "I need the wood box filled," Mara said. "Can you do that?" He narrowed his eyes. "You asking or telling?" "Asking. But I would be grateful if the answer were yes." He considered that. "I can do it." "Good. Lily, you may hand me plates. Only plates, not knives." Lily nodded solemnly, proud to be trusted. The day became work. Scrubbing, boiling, sweeping, hauling, sorting. Mara's hands cracked open before noon. Her back ached. Lily chattered while she worked, asking whether birds got cold, whether pancakes could be made with berries, whether dead mothers could see through roofs. Eli said little, but he stayed nearby. Near midday, while Mara was hanging bedding outside to freeze clean in the sharp air, a woman appeared at the edge of the clearing, leading a small paint mare. Silas came from the barn with his hand near his knife, then relaxed. "A pony," he called. The woman rode closer. She was perhaps 40, with black hair streaked once with silver and a wool blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes moved over Mara, the children, the bedding, the cabin, missing nothing. "I heard there were little ones here," she said. Silas nodded. "This is Mara, my wife." A pony looked at Mara for a long moment, then inclined her head. "Then your fire has changed." She brought willow bark for Lily's cough-dried chokecherries and a bundle of sage. Inside, she showed Mara how to steep the bark without making it too bitter. Lily watched her with open wonder. Eli watched with suspicion but did not interrupt. Before leaving, a pony paused beside Mara's sewing basket. The carved rattle lay half hidden beneath folded cloth. Her gaze rested on it, then lifted gently. "Some children stay in the arms," a pony said. "Some stay in the heart. Both make a woman listen different when another child cries." Mara could not answer. A pony did not require one. At dusk, Silas returned from checking the lower snares with 2 rabbits and snow in his beard. He stopped in the doorway and stared at the cabin, clean table-swept floor, washed plates. Lily asleep near the stove with a rag doll Mara had twisted from scrap cloth. Eli stacking kindling without being told. His face changed in a way Mara did not know what to do with. "Thank you," he said. "It is one day," she replied. "Do not make it heavier than that." That night, Lily woke screaming. Mara was on her feet before thought. She found the little girl sitting upright, choking on sobs, crying for a mother who would never come through the door. Eli sat beside her, helpless and furious with his own helplessness. Mara sat on the edge of the bed but did not reach. "I know," she whispered. "I know you want her." Lily sobbed harder. "I cannot fix that," Mara said. "It is not fair and it is not right, but I am here. If you need to cry, you cry. I will sit right here until you are done." Slowly, after a long while, Lily's sobs softened. Her small hand crept across the blanket and touched Mara's sleeve. Mara covered it gently. From the doorway, Eli watched. His face was tight, confused, almost angry. When Lily slept again, Mara stood and found Silas in the main room, sitting by the stove with his head in his hands. "I didn't know what to do when she cried," he said. "No one does it first. You did." Mara looked toward the children's room. "No, I only knew what not to say." The wind pressed against the cabin walls. Somewhere outside, pine branches scraped the roof like fingernails. Later, while Mara washed the last cup, Eli stood beside her drying plates. "You don't have to stay," he said suddenly. Mara kept her hands in the warm water. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know. That is honest." His jaw worked. "What if you're nice now, and then you get tired? What if you leave after Lily starts liking you?" Mara set the cup down. "If I leave," she said carefully, "it will not be because you and Lily were too hard to love." His eyes dropped. "I cannot promise the world will be kind," she continued. "I cannot promise nothing will go wrong. But I can promise I will not punish you for being children who lost too much." Eli said nothing, but he took the next wet plate from her hands. That was enough for one night. When Mara finally lay down in Silas's bed with Silas wrapped in blankets near the stove, she stared at the roof beams and listened to the cabin breathe. Lily whimpered once and settled. Eli shifted in his sleep. Silas fed the fire without speaking. This was not her family, not yet. But the room was warmer than it had been that morning. By the time spring mud began to show beneath the thinning snow, Lily followed Mara from stove to table to sewing basket like a small shadow. Eli still watched, still measured, still waited for promises to crack. Silas stopped apologizing for every loose board and began fixing them instead. And when flour, salt, coffee, and lamp oil ran low enough that even Silas could not pretend otherwise, Mara made a list and folded it into her pocket. "We have to go to town," she said. Silas looked toward Eli, then toward the trail dropping through the pines. Eli heard the words and went still. Cold Spring Crossing waited below them with its saloon, its store counters, its staring windows, and all the mouths that had not yet finished speaking of the mountain man and the wife he found before sunrise. The trail down to Cold Spring Crossing had turned mean with thaw. Snow still clung beneath the pines in dirty patches, but the road itself had become a long ribbon of mud, black and sucking with wagon ruts deep enough to twist a horse's ankle. The creek below the ridge ran swollen and loud with meltwater carrying broken sticks, ice crust, and the smell of earth waking too fast. Above them, the Wind River peaks still wore winter like a warning. Mara rode behind Silas with Lily tucked before her, wrapped in a brown shawl that had once belonged to Mara and now dragged over the child's boots. Eli rode the mule beside them, sitting stiff-backed, one hand on the rope reins, the other pressed against the small pocket where he kept a smooth stone from Crow Creek Pass. He had carried it since Silas brought him down from the dead wagon. Mara had seen him touch it whenever he was afraid. He was touching it now. "You keep close," Silas said without turning. "Both of you." "I know," Eli muttered. Silas glanced back. Knowing and doing ain't always kin. Eli's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Mara understood the boy's silence. The town had become larger in his mind than it truly was. It sat below the mountain full of windows, whispers, and people who had laughed the night Silas begged for a wife. It was the place that nearly sent a wagon to carry him and Lily away. A child remembered such things in the body before the mind knew what to call them. Lily, however, looked down the slope with bright worry. "Will Mr. Pike have peppermint?" "If he has any, Mara said we are buying flour first, not candy. Flour makes pancakes. It also makes bread. Peppermint makes happy." Silas made a sound low in his throat that might have been laughter. Mara felt it through his back and was quietly grateful for it. Cold Spring Crossing appeared at the bend in the road, no more than 24 buildings pressed between timber, mud, and sky. The Red Lantern Saloon stood near the center, its painted sign swinging in the wet wind. Beyond it sat the general store, the feed stable, the blacksmith shed, and the long 2-story office of the Voss Timber Company, dark-windowed and proud as a courthouse. People noticed them before they reached the hitching rail. A woman carrying a basket stopped outside the wash house. 2 lumber hands paused near a wagon. A clerk in a green visor looked out from the feed store and disappeared quickly back inside. Mara kept her chin level. She had spent years being looked at with pity. Suspicion was not much different, only colder. Tavish Pike came out of the saloon wiping his hands on a towel. "Well," he said, looking at Silas, then Mara, then the children. Mountain brought the whole weather system down with him. "Need supplies," Silas said. "That's so most folks come to town for conversation. Then most folks are foolish." Tavish grinned, but his eyes moved to Mara. "Ma'am, Mr. Pike. You need coffee. I got some that ain't mostly bark. You need gossip that's free and rotten." "We only came for what is useful," Mara said. "Then stay out of Voss's feed store if you can help it." Silas went still. "Why?" Tavish lowered his voice. "Harlan Voss has been asking after you, asking how many pelts you trade, how much land you claim, whether those children got kin somewhere. Men like him don't ask because he's neighborly." Mara looked toward the dark timber office. In the upper window a curtain shifted. Silas saw it too. "We're buying flour," Mara said. "Salt, coffee, lamp oil, thread if there is any worth the price. Then we go home." "Best plan I heard all week," Tavish said. He reached into his vest and pulled out a peppermint stick wrapped in paper, then held it toward Lily. "But I ain't arguing with happiness." Lily looked at Mara. "One," Mara said. Lily accepted it like communion. They crossed to the general store. Inside, the air smelled of molasses, leather dust, and smoked ham. Mara unfolded her list at the counter while Silas carried sacks and counted coins from a leather pouch. The prices were higher than they had been in winter. Mara knew it at once. Flour was 6 cents less last time, she said. The storekeeper, Mr. Bellows, avoided her eyes. Freight costs. Roads opened 2 weeks ago. Roads opened bad. Silas laid a hand on the counter. The wood creaked. Bellows swallowed. That's the price. Mara touched Silas's sleeve before his temper spoke for him. We will take half the sugar then. Outside, Eli stood with Lily near the mule watching a pair of boys roll a barrel along the boardwalk. Mara kept glancing toward them through the store window. She had begun to trust the cabin. She did not yet trust the town. She was wrapping lamp wicks in paper when Lily's voice rose outside. Leave him alone. Mara turned. Eli was gone from beside the mule. Silas reached the door before she did. Behind the store, between stacked crates and a rain barrel, 3 boys had Eli backed against the wall. The oldest was broad-faced and red-haired, maybe 14, wearing good boots and a coat too fine for mud. His brothers stood to either side, grinning with the easy cruelty of boys who had never been truly stopped. Rufus Voss. Mara knew him by his father's mouth. Well, look here, Rufus said. The orphan's got himself town clothes. They're not town clothes, one brother said. They're charity clothes. Eli's fists were clenched at his sides. Move. Rufus leaned closer. Or what? You'll run to that mountain savage or that pity wife he dragged from the saloon. Lily tried to push past Mara, but Mara held her back. Don't, Mara whispered. Rufus smiled wider. My pa says she married him because no decent man wanted her. Says you and your sister are nothing but strays. Strays get taken sooner or later. Eli's face changed. Mara saw it happen. Fear folded into shame, shame into rage. Silas took one step forward, but Eli spoke first. Shut your mouth. Rufus laughed. Make me. I said shut it. Your ma's dead, Rufus said. Your pa too. And that woman ain't your ma. She's just pretending till she gets tired of you. Eli hit him. The punch caught Rufus in the mouth and snapped his head sideways. For 1 second, everything held still. Then the other 2 boys jumped Eli together. Silas moved like a storm breaking loose, but Tavish Pike came faster from the saloon alley, catching one boy by the collar and throwing him backward into a crate. Silas seized the second and lifted him clear off the ground. Enough, Silas said, and his voice made even the horses quiet. Rufus sat in the mud blood on his lips, staring up with murder in his eyes. Eli was on one knee, breathing hard, his cheek already swelling, blood running from his nose onto his shirt. Tavish hauled Rufus upright. Get home before I tell your father you got dropped by a boy half your size. My father will hear, Rufus spat. Good, Tavish said. Tell it honest if your tongue remembers how. The Voss boys ran, but Rufus looked back once and Mara felt something cold pass through the street. At the cabin, Eli refused to sit until Mara took his chin in her hand and turned his face to the light. His lower lip was split. One eye would darken by morning. His knuckles were scraped raw. Did you throw the first punch? Silas asked. Eli stared at the floor. Yes. Did you warn him twice? Silas nodded. Then you did right. Mara looked up sharply. Silas. He spoke filth about this family, and 3 boys beat him bloody for it. A man's got a right to defend his family's honor. Mara set down the wet cloth with care. A man may defend his family, but he must not let anger become the only language his hands remember. The cabin went quiet. Eli's face closed. I ain't a man. No, Mara said softly. That is why we must be careful what we teach you. Silas looked away toward the window, jaw tight. He did not answer, but his silence was not agreement. It was only a place where anger stood waiting. The next morning, Silas saddled the horse before breakfast. Mara came out with her shawl around her shoulders. What are you doing? Going to speak with Harlan Voss. No. Silas pulled the cinch tight. His boys jumped Eli 3 against 1. And Harlan Voss owns the timber yard, the feed store, half the freight that comes through this valley, and enough men to make trouble look like law. Silas turned on her. So we bow. We think. I thought all night. That is not always the same thing. For a moment she thought he would shout. Instead, he looked past her to where Eli stood in the doorway, bruised and listening. They don't get to make him afraid to walk a street, Silas said. Mara understood then that arguing would not stop him. If he went alone, anger would speak first. If they went together, maybe truth still had a chance. We all go, she said. Silas frowned. Mara, all of us. If this is about family, then the family stands there. The Voss timber office smelled of cut pine ink and money. Harlan Voss sat behind a polished desk with his hands folded over his stomach. He was a heavy man with silver hair, clean nails, and eyes that measured people by what use could be wrung from them. "Crowheart," he said, "I heard there was boy trouble." "Your son's cornered mine," Silas said. Harlan's eyes flicked to Eli's bruised face without concern. "Boys scrap. That's how they learn. 3 against 1 is not scraping," Mara said. "It is cowardice practiced early." Harlan looked at her as if noticing furniture had spoken. "Mrs. Crowheart, is it?" "Yes. New name, new family, new opinions, old enough opinions to know cruelty when I see it." A clerk near the door stopped writing. Outside, a wagon slowed. Voices on the boardwalk quieted. Harlan's smile thinned. "Careful, ma'am. This town runs on trade. Trade runs on goodwill." Silas stepped forward. "You keep your boys away from Eli and Lily, or—" The room seemed to shrink around that word. Silas lowered his voice. "Or I come back." Harlan stood. He was not as tall as Silas, but power sat on him like a good coat. You live in a cabin on land nobody bothered to contest because nobody wanted it. You sell pelts twice a year and call that independence. Do not mistake loneliness for strength, Crowheart. Mara felt Eli shift beside her. Silas said nothing for a long moment. Then he took one step back. "We are done here." Outside, the street had too many eyes. Tavish Pike stood across the way, pretending to sweep the saloon porch. When Silas and Mara passed, he spoke low. "You kicked a hornet's nest. Should we have let the hornets sting the boy?" Mara asked. "No," Tavish said, "but now they know you'll swat back." Weeks passed without open trouble. That was worse. Flour rose again. Coffee was suddenly scarce. A neighbor who once traded eggs for pelts stopped coming by. At the cabin, Silas pretended not to notice how far their money stretched. Mara noticed everything. Eli noticed too, and guilt began sitting on his shoulders like another coat. One evening, as Mara mended his shirt, he said, "If I hadn't hit Rufus, none of this would have happened." Mara threaded her needle. "If Rufus had kept a decent tongue in his head, none of this would have happened. I made it worse. Cruel people often blame the first person who refuses to kneel." Eli stared at the fire. "I don't want to kneel. I know. I don't want Lily hearing them things. I know that too." His hands curled into fists. He had begun practicing behind the barn when he thought nobody saw striking a grain sack Silas had hung for drying herbs. Mara had watched once from the window. The look on his face had troubled her more than the punches. Before she could speak, hoofbeats sounded outside. Silas reached for his rifle, then stopped when a voice called from the yard. "Silas Crowheart, open up." The sheriff stood beyond the porch with 2 deputies and a folded paper in his hand. His face was official and empty. Silas opened the door. "What do you want, Eli Mercer Crowheart?" Mara moved behind Eli without thinking. "Why?" The sheriff unfolded the paper. "Rufus Voss says the boy attacked him near Crow Creek yesterday and broke his jaw. Clay and Ben Voss witnessed it. I have a warrant." "That's a lie," Eli whispered. "He was here," Mara said. "All day. With family," the sheriff replied. "That won't weigh much." Silas's hand drifted toward the rifle by the wall. Mara stepped in front of him. "No," she said quietly. The whole room held its breath. She looked at the sheriff. "We will bring him in ourselves." Silas stared at her. "Mara, we will not let you drag a child from this house like a criminal," she said. "But we will not run from a lie either." The sheriff studied her, then folded the warrant. "Noon tomorrow. If he ain't standing before Judge Wren, I come back with men enough to make this unpleasant." After they rode away, Lily began to cry. Eli stood very still, too still, like a boy trying to turn himself into stone. Silas gripped the back of a chair until the wood cracked. "We could leave tonight," he said. Mara looked at him across the lamplit room with the children between them and the mountain, dark, pressing hard against the windows. "If we run," she said, "they own his name forever. And if the judge believes them," Mara had no comfort ready, only truth. "Then we stand closer," she said. Before dawn, she packed bread, water, and clean cloth for Eli's face. Silas saddled the horse and mule in silence. Lily refused to stay behind, clinging to Mara's skirt until no one had the heart to argue. They rode down from the cabin as the first pale light touched the Wind River peaks. Cold Spring Crossing waited below, and somewhere inside it, behind timber walls and polished glass, Harlan Voss had turned his son's lie into law. The courthouse at Cold Spring Crossing had once been a church, and some mornings it still looked ashamed of what it had become. The bell rope hung unused beside the door. The windows were narrow and wavy with old glass. A rough judge's bench had been built where the pulpit used to stand, and the floorboards still held the faint smell of candle wax beneath the newer smells of mud tobacco. Damp wool, and men come to watch somebody else suffer. By the time Silas brought his family through the door, every bench was filled. Mara felt the room turn toward them. Whispers moved like mice in the walls. There he is. That's the boy. Mountain trash. Poor little thing. Lily's hand tightened inside Mara's. The child wore her blue wool dress, the one Mara had let down twice and patched at both elbows. Her hair had been brushed smooth, though the wind had already freed several pale strands around her cheeks. Eli walked between Mara and Silas, his face still marked from the beating behind the store. One eye was yellowing around the edges. His split lip had healed crooked. He kept his hands at his sides, but Mara could see the tremor in his fingers. Silas walked like a man carrying a rifle no one could see. The Voss family sat in the front row on the right. Harlan Voss wore a black coat, polished boots, and an expression of mild injury, as if he were the one dragged here by lies. Beside him sat his wife, stiff and pale, her gloved hands folded. Rufus Voss had a white cloth wrapped beneath his jaw and tied over his head. Clay and Ben sat near him, both scrubbed clean and smug with the importance of being believed. Rufus looked at Eli and smiled with his eyes. Mara felt Eli see it. She felt the boy's whole body go tight. "Look at me," she whispered. Eli did. "You stand straight because you are telling the truth," she said, "not because they deserve fear from you." He swallowed and nodded. Silas led them to the left front bench. It groaned beneath his weight. Lily climbed onto Mara's lap without being asked and buried her face against Mara's shawl. A side door opened. "All rise," the sheriff called. Judge Malachi Wren entered slowly, one hand resting on the back of his chair before he lowered himself into it. He was old enough that every movement seemed negotiated with pain. But his eyes were not old. They were pale, sharp, and steady as winter water. "Sit," he said. The room obeyed. The prosecutor, a thin man named Mr. Dyer, stood and smoothed the front of his coat. "Your Honor, the territory brings the matter of assault against Eli Mercer Crowhart. The injured party, Rufus Voss, claims the defendant attacked him near Crow Creek and broke his jaw." Judge Wren looked over his spectacles at Eli. "How old is the boy?" "8, Your Honor." "8," the judge repeated, as if placing a stone on a scale. "Proceed." Rufus was called first. He took the chair beside the bench with a solemnity so practiced, Mara nearly looked away in disgust. Dyer asked his questions gently. Rufus answered through his bandage voice, muffled but clear enough. He had been walking near Crow Creek. He had wanted to fish. Eli came from the brush and struck him without warning. Eli said he was paying him back for what happened behind the store. Eli knocked him down and kept hitting until Clay and Ben pulled him away. Every sentence landed too neat. Silas stood when Dyer finished. The judge looked at him. "You questioning the witness?" Silas removed his hat slowly. "Yes, sir." "Then ask questions. Don't make speeches." Silas stepped forward. He looked too large for the narrow aisle, too wild for the room. Men who would not have feared him in timber or snow watched with interest now, because here in this place, words were the only weapons permitted. "You say Eli came from the brush," Silas said. "Yes." "On foot?" Rufus blinked. "I reckon. Crow Creek sits better than 6 miles from my cabin. You say he walked 6 miles through thaw mud, found you beat you, then walked 6 miles back without mud on his boots and without anyone seeing him." Rufus's eyes moved toward Harlan. "I don't know how he got there. You didn't see a horse?" "No." "Did you see tracks? I was being attacked." A few men shifted on the benches. Silas nodded once. "What was Eli wearing?" Rufus frowned. "A shirt. What color? I don't remember. You remember his words, his fists, his purpose, but not the color of the shirt on the boy breaking your jaw." Dyer stood. "Argumentative, sustained," Judge Wren said. "Question better Crowhart." Silas's jaw worked. "Was it blue? Maybe." Gray. Rufus flushed. "Could have been." "Done," Silas said. Clay Voss was called next. He told the same story. Too much the same. He and Ben had been walking the ridge above Crow Creek when they heard Rufus shouting. They ran down and saw Eli on top of him, swinging like a wild animal. Silas asked where they had been standing. Clay said above the creek. Silas asked why they were on the ridge, if they meant to fish. Clay said they were looking for a good spot. Silas asked whether fish had taken to climbing trees since last winter. A low ripple of laughter moved through the back until Judge Wren struck the bench with his gavel. Quiet. Ben Voss came last. He was 11 and not made of the same hard material as his brothers. His face reddened before the first question. He said Eli wore blue. Then, under Silas's questioning, he said the fight happened by a fallen pine. Rufus had said creek bank. Clay had said gravel bar. When Silas asked which hand Eli struck with, Ben looked at Harlan. "Answer the question," Judge Wren said. "Right," Ben whispered. Eli was left-handed. Mara felt something loosen in her chest, but not enough to breathe. Tavish Pike was called after them. He came in from the back, hat crushed in his hands, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt. "Mr. Pike, Dyer said you witnessed an earlier fight between these boys." "I broke one up," Tavish said. "Did Eli strike Rufus first?" "He did." Dyer gave a satisfied nod. "No further." But Tavish added. Judge Wren lifted one eyebrow, but Tavish looked at Harlan, then at the judge. "But Rufus and his brothers had that boy boxed in behind the store. I heard enough to know they were saying low things about his dead folks and Mrs. Crowheart. Eli warned him. Twice, I think. Then he swung. After that, the 3 Voss boys jumped him. Harlan shifted in his seat. Judge Wren wrote something down. Mara was called next. Her legs felt distant as she walked to the chair. She placed one hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Across the room, Harlan Voss watched her with a faint smile, as if he already knew what her truth was worth. Silas stood before her, hat in hand. "Where was Eli on the day Rufus says he was attacked?" "At home," Mara said. "All day. What was he doing repairing the chicken coop with us?" "He carried boards, held wire, and hammered slats until near supper." "Did he leave your sight?" Dyer rose for cross-examination. He approached with polite steps and a cruel little mouth. "Mrs. Crowheart, you married Silas Crowheart in the middle of the night, did you not?" "Yes." "To prevent Eli and Lily from being taken by the marshal?" "Yes. So keeping this family together matters greatly to you." "It does. And if Eli is convicted, your household may be judged unfit." Mara looked at him. "My household is not on trial. Your honesty is." Silas stepped forward, but Judge Wren lifted a hand. Dyer continued. "You would do anything for these children, would you not?" "No," Mara said. The answer stopped him. "No, I would not lie for them. A lie may save a child for a day and ruin him for life." The room went still. Dyer's eyes narrowed. "You expect this court to believe that a woman who married a stranger for these children would not bend truth to keep them?" "I married a stranger because truth had put 2 children in danger," Mara said. "That does not make me false. It makes me present." Judge Wren's pen paused over the paper. Dyer found no crack and sat down. A pony red elk was called after Mara. Some in the room muttered when she walked forward in her wool blanket and beadwork, but Judge Wren silenced them with a look. A pony swore in her own plain way. She said she had passed below Silas's cabin that afternoon gathering willow bark and had seen Eli in the yard with boards under his arm. She remembered because Lily had waved at her with both hands and nearly dropped a tin cup. Dyer tried to suggest she was mistaken about the day. A pony looked at him with calm eyes. "Willow bark cuts best before rain. Rain came that night. I know the day. That was all." At last, Judge Wren looked at Eli. "Stand up, son." Eli rose. The room seemed to lean toward him. "Did you attack Rufus Voss at Crow Creek?" "No, sir." "Did you break his jaw?" "No, sir." "Did you strike him before behind the store?" "Yes, sir." Why Eli's throat moved. "He was talking bad about my family, about Mara, about Lily, about my dead ma and pa. Did you warn him?" "Yes, sir." "How many times?" "Twice." Judge Wren leaned forward, his old face unreadable. Then he asked very quietly, "Did you try to be kind before you reached for anger?" The words passed through Mara like a remembered bell. Eli looked confused for a moment, then afraid, then honest. "Yes, sir," he said. "I tried." But he wouldn't stop. "And at Crow Creek I wasn't there." Judge Wren sat back. No one breathed. The old judge looked at Rufus, at Clay, at Ben. He looked at Harlan Voss. He looked at Silas, Mara, Lily, and Eli. "I have heard 3 boys tell one story too cleanly," he said. "I have heard a widow hold steady under insult. I have heard a Shoshone woman remember rain better than some boys remember lies, and I have heard enough contradiction to trouble any honest court." Harlan's smile vanished. Judge Wren continued, "The charges are dismissed." The room burst open with sound. Harlan stood. "You cannot dismiss this. My son's jaw is broken." "Sit down, Mr. Voss. This is an outrage." Judge Wren's gavel cracked against the bench. "It will become contempt if you remain standing." Harlan's face darkened, but he sat. Eli did not move. Mara reached for his hand. Only then did he seem to understand that he was not being taken away. Outside, the light was too bright. Townspeople watched from doorways as the Crowheart family stepped into the street. Nobody cheered. Nobody apologized. But they looked differently now, and that difference had weight. Judge Wren came out behind them, leaning on his cane. Crowheart. Silas turned. The judge's voice lowered. You won today because those boys lied poorly. Do not mistake that for safety. I won't. Harlan Voss has money, pride, and reach. That is a dangerous breed of man. You have children now. Remember that before you kick another hornet's nest. Silas said nothing. The judge looked at Eli. And you, stay away from those boys. If they come, leave. If they talk, leave. You hear me? Eli's jaw tightened. Yes, sir. Judge Wren's eyes softened only a fraction. Being right won't help you much if you are alone and bleeding. They rode home without speaking for a long while. Lily slept against Mara's chest, worn out by fear. Eli rode behind Silas, staring at his hands. The thawing road shone wet beneath the afternoon sun. Near the ridge, Eli finally spoke. Why did he ask me that Mara knew what he meant? Because she had asked it first. Because the question that had made a family in a saloon had now saved that family in a courtroom. Because kindness tells the truth about a person when anger is easier, she said. Eli frowned. But Rufus ain't kind. No. Harlan Voss ain't kind. No. Then why do we have to be? Mara looked toward the mountains where their cabin waited beneath the pines. Because if we let cruel people decide who we become, they have taken more than we can afford to lose. That night, after Lily and Eli had fallen asleep, Mara found Silas outside by the woodpile, staring down toward the faint lights of Cold Spring Crossing. We were lucky, he said. Yes. If Wren believed them, Eli would be gone. Yes, I wanted to take him and run. I know. Silas looked at her. Maybe I still do. Mara stepped beside him. The air smelled of wet pine and thawing earth. This is our home. Harlan Voss won't forget. No, she said. Men like him keep their grudges fed. Then, what do? We keep the children close. We keep our word. We do not give them a reason. Silas looked down at his hands, big and scarred and helpless, against the kind of trouble money could make. I know how to fight wolves, he said. I don't know how to fight this. Mara touched his sleeve. Then we learn. Far below, Cold Spring Crossing glimmered in the dark like a handful of coals. For a while, nothing moved but the wind. Summer would come. The roads would dry. The town would talk itself tired. Life would settle back into work and chores and guarded peace. But somewhere in the valley, Harlan Voss had been shamed in front of men who feared him. And pride like his did not die quiet. The smoke rose from Cold Spring Crossing on a windless morning, black and straight as a judgment. Mara saw it first while hanging wash behind the cabin. One of Silas's shirts was still in her hands, heavy with creek water, when the dark column climbed above the pines and widened against the pale summer sky. For a moment she stood without breathing, the wet cloth dripping onto her boots. Smoke that thick did not come from a cook stove. It did not come from brush. It came from boards, oil pitch, and disaster. Silas came out of the barn with a hammer in his hand. He followed her gaze and went still. That's town, he said. No. Mara whispered. Not all of it. His eyes narrowed. Voss Timber Yard. Eli appeared from behind the woodpile, taller now, 12 years old, and all sharp elbows, hard eyes, and restless hands. Lily came after him, her braid half undone, flour on her cheek from helping with bread. They both looked toward the smoke. Are we going? Lily asked. Silas's jaw tightened. No. Mara turned to him. If that yard is burning, he said, Harlan Voss will look for somebody to blame before the ashes cool. We ride in and we hand him our faces. If we stay here, Mara said, we hand him our silence. Silas looked at her like he hated that she was right. The fire was worse than the smoke promised. By the time they reached Cold Spring Crossing, the Voss timber yard was roaring like a living beast. Flames climbed the stacked pine and leaped from beam to beam, throwing sparks high enough to frighten birds from the church roof. Men shouted, women hauled water, horses screamed from the freight shed until somebody cut them loose. The whole street smelled of pitch-wet ashes, burned wool, and panic. Mara handed Lily to a pony red elk who was already binding a man's blistered arm near the saloon steps. Keep her back. The pony nodded once. Go. Mara joined the bucket line without another word. Tavish Pike shoved a pail into Silas's hands. For hours no one had time to hate anybody. Water passed from hand to hand. Smoke blackened faces until rich men and poor men looked the same. Eli worked beside Silas, carrying half buckets at first, then full ones, his young shoulders shaking with effort. Lily ran cups of water to coughing women until Mara caught her by the arm and made her rest. They didn't save this timber yard. No one could have. By dusk, Harlan Voss's proudest business lay in black ribs and steaming mud. Harlan was away in Lander on freight business. That was mercy for the town and trouble waiting to return. 2 days later, trouble came wearing a badge. Sheriff Cole rode up to the cabin with 2 deputies and a face carved out of duty. Silas met him on the porch. Mara stood in the doorway behind him. Lily pressed against her skirt, Eli just inside the shadow of the room. The sheriff held up a twisted piece of blackened metal. "Trap spring," he said. "Found in the ashes, marked with your cut." Silas stared at it. "I make traps. I trade traps. Half the valley has handled my iron. This one was found near where the fire started." Mara felt the air leave the cabin. "You think he burned the yard?" she said. "I think Harlan Voss will say he did." "I was here," Silas said. "All that day." "With your wife and children?" the sheriff replied. "Convenient." Mara stepped onto the porch. A pony passed the lower trail that afternoon. She heard hammering. "Saw smoke from our chimney." Silas was repairing the barn roof. The sheriff's eyes moved to the barn, where fresh shingles shone pale against the old wood. "Tavish Pike saw one of Voss's hired men near the trapper stalls 3 days before the fire," Mara added. "Ask him." Cole's mouth flattened. "I will." He rode off without chains, but rumor came faster than any horse. By week's end, people in town whispered that the mountain man had burned Harlan Voss down to coals. By the next, they whispered louder. Eli heard it in the feed store. Silas had taken him to town against Mara's better judgment, needing salt nails and coffee. They were loading the mule when Rufus Voss stepped from the alley with Clay and another older boy behind him. Rufus had grown broad over 3 years, his face harder, his smile meaner. "Arsonist's pup," Rufus said. Eli kept tying the sack. "Your pa too coward to burn a man while he's home." Silas turned from the hitching rail, but Clay moved between them just enough to slow him. Rufus leaned close. "Maybe your pity ma helped. Women like that lie easy once they start." Eli did not warn him. He struck Rufus in the nose so hard the boy dropped backward into the mud. Clay grabbed him, and Eli drove an elbow into his mouth. The older boy rushed from the side, but Eli ducked and kicked his knee out from under him. Rufus tried to rise, blood pouring over his lips. Eli hit him again. Silas tore him away. "Enough!" Eli's chest heaved. His knuckles were split. His eyes were bright, not with fear, not even anger. Satisfaction. That frightened Mara more than blood when Silas brought him home. She cleaned his hands at the table while he sat stiff and silent. "Did you warn them?" she asked. "No." "Why?" "Because I'm tired of warning wolves before they bite." Silas stood by the stove, face shadowed. "They started it," Eli said. "I finished it." Mara laid the cloth down. "That is not the same as justice." Eli looked at her then, and for the first time she saw not the little boy who had stood with a kitchen knife before Lily, but the man he might become if bitterness raised him faster than love could. "I ain't sorry," he said. "I'd do it again." That night after the children slept, Mara found Silas outside under a sky white with stars. "We're losing him," she said. Silas did not answer. "We taught him to stand. We taught him not to bow. But somewhere along the way, he learned to enjoy hitting back. They cornered him, and he chose revenge before warning." Silas rubbed both hands over his face. Maybe he earned a little revenge. Mara's voice shook. "If revenge is all we leave him, then Harlan Voss raised him as much as we did." The words hurt him. She saw that. She meant them to. 2 mornings later, Judge Malachi Wren rode into the clearing on a tired bay horse older than any man had a right to look and still sit straight in a saddle. He handed Silas a folded writ sealed in red wax. "Territorial order," he said. "Harlan Voss is to cease harassment, intimidation, and interference with your household. If he or his boys bring another false charge, they answer to Cheyenne." Silas stared at the paper. "Why?" "Because I got tired of watching a rich man use the law like a club." Wren's eyes moved toward the cabin window where Eli watched, and because that boy once told me he tried to be kind before he reached for anger. Mara folded her arms against the chill. "He didn't this time," Wren said. "No," she answered. "Then tell him this. The law may hold off Voss, but it cannot save a boy from becoming cruel. He gets another chance, not endless chances." 1. When the judge had gone, Mara waited until dark, then she sat across from Eli at the kitchen table while the lamp burned low. "The judge came," she said. "I know. He brought paper that may keep Voss away." Eli's face flickered, relief then something like disappointment. "He also said you have one more chance." Eli looked down. "I didn't start it, no. But you stopped being the boy who warned twice." His mouth tightened. "I'm tired of being kind." Mara nodded. "So was I." That made him look up. "After my husband died, after my baby died, I woke every morning angry enough to hate the whole world. I hated women with children. I hated church bells. I hated sunlight for coming through the window like nothing had happened. Some days kindness felt like a lie I had to drag behind me. Then why do it? Because anger was the only thing death had left me. If I let it become my whole heart, then grief would have taken me too." Eli's eyes shone, but he didn't cry. Mara reached across the table, stopping short of his hand. "Kindness is not what saved us from winter. Kindness is what kept winter from living inside us." For a long while, only the lamp hissed. Then Eli bent forward and covered his face. The first sob came out broken and furious. Mara went to him, and this time he let her hold him. He cried for his dead parents, for Lily, for all the words he had swallowed, for every time he had been afraid, and called it anger because anger stood taller. Years softened what hatred had tried to sharpen. Harlan Voss rebuilt smaller. His sons drifted away one by one, chasing easier towns and weaker men. The whispers thinned, then faded. Cold Spring Crossing found new scandals, new winters, new graves. Eli grew quiet and strong, but not cruel. He helped neighbors mend roofs, pulled wagons from mud, and walked away from fights that once would have called his name. Lily became a teacher, walking 3 miles to the little schoolhouse with books tied in a flour sack, fearless as sunrise. Mara and Silas changed too, though more slowly. One cold evening, many years later, he left his blankets by the stove and stood awkwardly beside the bed. "Reckon I've slept on that floor long enough," he said. Mara looked up from her sewing. "I reckoned that years ago." So he climbed in beside her, gentle as a promise, and the marriage that had begun before dawn finally became something both of them chose in the dark. When Eli married Anna Pike in the meadow below the cabin, Judge Wren was too old to stand long but stubborn enough to perform the vows. Tavish cried and denied it. A pony placed sage on the edge of the clearing and smiled when Lily scattered wildflowers too heavily in one place. Eli took Anna's hands. His voice did not shake. "I will be kind to you," he said. "I promise." Mara felt Silas reach for her hand. Long after, when their hair had gone white and their grandchildren ran laughing through the same clearing where fear had once stood at the door, Silas asked her if she ever regretted that night in the saloon. Mara watched Eli lift a crying child from the dirt, speaking softly until the tears stopped. "Not once," she said. The mountains darkened purple. Smoke rose from the chimney. Supper waited inside the cabin that had been shelter, then home, then legacy. And in Cold Spring Crossing, people still told the story of the mountain man who needed a wife before sunrise, and the widow who asked only one question before giving him her name. Not whether life would be easy, not whether love would come, not whether the world would be fair, only whether he would be kind. In the end, that answer was enough to build everything.